Fahima Mohammed said that Britain is no longer a Christian country and, in fact, needs Islam. But Raif Hadomanku completely shuts her down. At that time where record levels of immigration and Islam are radically changing our country and our democracy, this debate is more important now than ever. Let's watch.
It's just only when it comes to the Muslim community. We need someone to blame for whether it is any problem, any crime, any sort of, discernment. Yes, it's easy to have a target of a Muslim. When actually you go into your NHS, you go into majority of professionals, they do actually have a high collaboration when it comes to contribution to this country. Majority of the London itself is owned by Qatar Muslims. Majority of people that are even against Islam will go and even live in Dubai, a Muslim country. Why not Europe? Why not anywhere else? At the end of the day, we are not a culture or religion which is not cohesive, which is not of understanding, and we're not of same values. It's only people that want to create divide and hate. That's when they will talk in that kind of rhetoric and propaganda. When actually, if you talk about the faith itself, it has similar values, similar ways, and it's definitely in line with British culture. You want to call about certain individuals? Well, I can do the same on this, for example, extremism when it comes to the white supremacists or the far right or anything like that. And
now, there's a lot of people around the country who think this way. So as much as you might think, why is this getting airtime? It's really important to hear and understand the kind of ideas that are floating around.
I mean, you've packed an awful lot in there, so we've packed a lot in there, so I want to give Raif a chance to respond. Raif, let's just see if you could just tackle the core of that head on. Fahima's characterization of Britain as not being a Christian country, and arguing that Islam is compatible with British democratic culture.
Let me know in the comments what you think about that question.
Well, the simple reality is Britain is a Christian country. We have an established church. We have an official national church in the Church of England and in the Church of Scotland. The King, of course, is Supreme Governor of the Church of England and defender of the faith. The sovereign is crowned in a Christian ceremony by the Archbishop. He is anointed as a sacrament akin to joining the priesthood with holy oil. We are, along with Iran and Britain are the only two countries to have clerics in their legislature. We have archbishops in the House of Lords. We are fundamentally a Christian country, and it goes far beyond that, of course, because even if you are an atheist today, if you are a secular liberal Democrat voting atheist, you are going to be somebody who supports the idea of universal human rights, for example. Well, that is a fundamentally Christian concept, the whole idea of the ultimate inherent dignity of the individual. You don't find that in Islamic cultures. You don't find that, in fact, in non-Christian cultures.
Now, Raif is going to explain some of the challenges that Islam actually presents in the UK that people like Fahima don't want to address.
And look, no one is saying at all, of course, that all Muslims are bad at all, and Islam is not compatible. But there is a very significant problem here that we're afraid to address for fear of being accused of being Islamophobic. I'm afraid the reality is you have 52% of Muslims in this country believe homosexuality should be illegal. It's only 5% in the broader population. 62% want to suppress free speech to stop causing offence to religions. 1/3 of young British Muslims, 16 to 24, believe you should be put to death for apostasy, for leaving the faith. Britain is now the global center of honor killings, of acid attacks rather, but we have honor killings, forced marriage, cousin marriage, child marriage, polygamy. These are all things people are afraid to address because of the issue of Islamophobia. That's not being practiced by the entire Muslim population, but it's very sizable. And always remember, there are 400,000 Muslims in this country, between 350,000 and 400, who identify as being extremists and support terrorism. There are 40,000 jihadis on the terror watch list of MI5. 1 in every 100 Muslims is on the jihadi terror watch list. That's only going to grow exponentially as the Muslim population increases to perhaps under 20% by 2025. So potentially you will have a number of people on the jihadi watch list that's larger than the British Army. The number of people on the jihadi watch list is already larger than the number of Hamas fighters on October the 7th, larger than the size of the ISIS army in Iraq in 2014. These are
Wow.
real issues and real challenges we need to face, not to mention that 40% of the mosques in this country are run by the extremist Deobandi cult, which is what gave birth to the Taliban, and the majority of the prison chaplains who are Muslim in this country belong to this same extremist Deobandi sect. Those are the challenges of Islam that we need to face, and that is in no way a criticism of the well-adjusted Muslims who are an integrated and important part of British society.
And this is crazily important, not only because of where we are as a country, where 6.5% of people in the UK are Muslim, and yet they account for 75%. Islamist terror accounts for 75% of MI5's counter-terror workload, but also because we're seeing how Islam and Muslim communities are gaining so much leverage over our political system. So the Green Party, who recently won the Gorton and Denton by-election, made whole adverts in Urdu, which is a language spoken by mostly South Asian Muslims, showing that major political parties are able to gain power by saying to whole communities, hey, you don't need to assimilate into Britain. You can bring your practices, your languages, you can be exactly who you are in Britain. This land is for you and your practices in as much as it is for anyone else, because, it's not like we're a Christian country anymore. That's what's happening in our politics. Not only that, but it's a very well-known fact that over a long period of time, the Labour Party, or our current government, or who form the current government, have been very happy to side with the Muslim community, even when there's very clear evidence of extremist views, anti-British views, anti-Christian views from the kind of people that they're supporting. And Robert Jenrick did a whole video exposing Rachel Reeves, for example, who's currently in control of the purse strings, and her relationship with mosque leaders who are known to have links with terrorists. Like, this is where we are as a country. This is why these conversations are really important. At the same time, the Labour Party are actively working on their anti-Muslim hatred definition. And if this was to be passed, part of the language that they're trying to put forward would completely outlaw any conversation about the challenges of Islam. It would completely protect Islam in a way that no other ideology, no other religion, no other group of people are protected. Look, it talks about encouraging, anti-Muslim hostility, how it defines it, is engaging in or encouraging criminal acts, including, and just look at this long list of things: violence, vandalism, harassment, intimidation, whether physical, verbal, written, or electronically communicated, which is directed at Muslims or those perceived to be Muslims because of their ethnicity or appearance. So basically everything that Rafe has just said in that video could very easily be classed as anti-Muslim hatred, meaning that even challenges about the safety of the UK would become outlawed. That is so crazy. Why are we seeing this much power, legal protection, cultural, social protection given to Islam? Well, one of the reasons, and this is spoken about by a Muslim himself, Ed Hussein, in a book called Among the Mosques, A Journey Across Muslim Britain. He describes that Muslim organization that Raif Haidar Manku was talking about, the Tablighi Jamaat, which is like the evangelistic arm of the Deobandi movement. And he also speaks about organizations like the Muslim Brotherhood that have made it their clear intention to establish a Muslim caliphate in the UK. Now, their approach, some organizations' approach, is to take more of a populist revival approach, where they want to get as many Muslims as possible to support them and then drive change through policy, through legislation. That's why you're seeing these really weird alliances between the left-wing parties that claim to be secular and liberal and progressive on all these issues like LGBT and trans and all the rest of it, siding with these very strictly fundamentalist Muslim politicians and Muslim leaders. It's bizarre, but it's intentional, because it's the way that they are trying to gain power. And of course, we know that the left-wing parties are more likely to tap into that identity politics, calling everybody racist if they talk about immigration and talk about these things. And so in the short term, it's a win-win. Trouble is that these communities, these groups, the Deobandi movement, the Tablighi Jamaat, these organizations are in it for the long term. They want to establish Sharia law as the law of the land. Sharia law being law that is based on the Quran. This is a bad thing. Not only is it a bad thing because it would mean that those who are not Muslim are essentially second-class citizens in that nation, one of the components of Sharia law would include the jizya, which is a tax that non-Muslims have to pay to the Muslim state, literally for protection. But it would be horrible for all other sorts of reasons. I mean, one example would be what it means for the safety and protection of women and vulnerable people in our communities. Just take, for example, what Quran chapter 4 verse 34 says about how a husband is meant to deal with his wife if she is disobedient to him. It says, men are the caretakers of women, as men have been provisioned by Allah of women and tasked with supporting them financially. Then, if you sense misconduct from your women, advise them first. And if they persist, do not share their beds. And if they still persist, strike them. That's right, you strike them. If they change their ways, don't be unjust to them. Because striking them when they're husband striking his wife when she's disobedient, that's not unjust. But well, if that's not unjust, what is unjust? And this is what a lot of people are realizing. Many people who say England and the UK are not Christian countries are realizing that actually the Christian foundation, the Christian morality that has built this nation is essential to protect. Because you look at what the Bible has to say about how husbands and wives are meant to interact. And of course, there's nowhere in the Bible that would ever condone a husband striking his wife. In fact, you see the exact opposite. The Bible talks about how husbands are to treat their wives. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 25, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Okay? In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. That obviously gives you absolutely zero ground to be striking your wife, which the Quran would give. This is the problem with the whole all religions are equal, Britain is a secular country mentality, because then you open the floodgates to any worldview to come in. And when you have strong and determined Muslim organizations that are really trying to establish a caliphate in the UK, you've got nothing to push back on, because you want to say all faiths are equal and stuff like that, which is obviously not true. But when you say instead, we look at Britain, we love the Christian heritage that we've inherited, and we love the morality that has built up this nation, as Rafe was highlighting, and that as any honest person could see just looking at Britain's history and the fact that all of our, every fundamental structure and pillar that was made in the UK, from our parliamentary democracy, Magna Carta, to our abolition of slavery, was built by men and women that believe the Bible is the word of God, and that believe that Jesus Christ is the way that we can be forgiven of our sins, that he's a compassionate, strong, holy man who's fully God, and that we should then be compassionate and righteous to other people as well, and everything else that has caused this great nation to be great. If we want to protect that, we must say no to the rise of Islam and Islam's influence on our politics, on our immigration, on everything, and instead say we want Britain to remain British and we want Britain to remain Christian.